They say the past always catches up, but for Daniel Weaver, it didn't just return, it hunted him. For years, he wore a smile over his secrets, thinking he could bury what he had done. But when the dead start to whisper, when guilt becomes a living voice, that's when survival turns into punishment. This isn't just a story. This is a chase against memory itself. The rain started just as it always did in Hawthorne Town, without warning, like a secret spilling over the edge. Daniel Weaver stood at his window, watching it trace thin lines down the glass, like the world was melting right in front of him. His cup of tea had gone cold. It always did. He never finished anything these days. Work, sleep, conversations, tea. Everything felt abandoned halfway, like his mind was always somewhere else, somewhere darker, somewhere before. His neighbor, Mrs. Avery, knocked gently and left a pie at the door, just like she did every Sunday. Daniel waited until her footsteps faded before opening the door. He smiled faintly. He always smiled. People liked him, trusted him, but none of them really knew him. That smile of his was a disguise, one he'd worn for years, one he was afraid to take off. As the evening grew quieter, a strange sound echoed through his house. A knock. Not at the door, but from inside the walls. Daniel froze. Tap, tap, tap. He felt it in his bones. It was slow, almost rhythmic, like someone, something, was patiently waiting. But he couldn't tell if it was real or if his thoughts were finally becoming too loud to ignore. He stared at the hallway. A shadow seemed to shift by the staircase, but when he blinked, it was gone. Not tonight, he whispered to himself. He poured himself another cup of tea and walked away, pretending not to feel that steady tapping that followed him from room to room. The next morning, the town was bright. Birds sang. Children ran to school. Daniel smiled at them, waved at Mrs. Avery, and cycled to work. The world seemed normal again, safe. He worked as a photographer at a small newspaper agency. People called him the man who captures memories. If only they knew. He was the man who tried hardest to forget them. That day he was assigned to take pictures of an abandoned house just outside town. Strange noises had been reported there. Locals claimed the house cried at night, like it remembered someone who never came back. Daniel didn't want to go. His hands trembled slightly as he packed his camera. But he couldn't say no, because saying no would raise questions, and questions were the last thing he wanted. The house was crooked, broken, and lonely. Its windows were like empty eyes, staring at him. As he stepped inside, the air felt wrong, too still, too cold, as though the house had been holding its breath, waiting for him. He lifted his camera and took the first shot. Flash. The room lit up light for a second. He felt it. Someone stood behind him. He didn't turn around. "Who's there?" he said. Silence. But silence, he realized, could sometimes answer more than words. He controlled his breathing, lifted his camera once more, and took another picture. Flash. There, in the corner, through the lens, he saw a figure. A boy. Thin, pale, watching him. Daniel spun around. No one was there. He checked the picture. The corner was empty. But his heart wasn't lying. His fear wasn't lying. That boy had been real, even if only his guilt could see him. He backed away slowly, his camera shaking in his grip. "I didn't mean to," he murmured under his breath. The words slipped out before he could control them. "I didn't mean to," he said again. "It was an accident." But the silence inside the house seemed to grow heavy, almost like it was listening. As he left the house, he felt eyes on him. He didn't know if they were real. He didn't know if they were human. But he felt hunted. Not by a ghost, not by a person, but by the one thing that had never stopped following him. His past. That night he dreamt of a lake, a moonlit lake, and a scream. A boy's scream. The same boy he saw in the photograph. Daniel woke up shaking. His hands were cold, his heart colder. He whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, stop." But the tapping had returned. This time, sleep abandoned him completely. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt the house breathing. The silence had grown into something alive, something aware of him. The tapping had stopped, but it was replaced by something far worse. It started faintly, so faint he doubted it was real. Yet each night it became clearer, more forceful, as though someone wanted not just to be heard, but remembered. Daniel. It knew his name. He spent his days pretending, smiling at the neighbors, asking about their families, helping with groceries. But inside, he was coming apart. One evening, while editing his photographs at work, his colleague Mark leaned over and said, "Hey mate, look at this one." It was a photo from the abandoned house. In the reflection of a window, there was something behind Daniel's shoulder. A face. The same pale boy. Daniel's hand shook so violently that Mark noticed. "Oi, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," Daniel lied, swallowing his panic. Just tired." Mark shrugged and moved away, but before he turned, he said something that froze Daniel completely. "Funny thing is, that boy looks a bit like you when you were younger." Daniel's blood ran cold. He deleted the photo immediately, but it didn't help. The image stayed in his mind, etched into his thoughts like a memory carved into stone. That night he couldn't sit still. He paced the house restlessly until the voices came again. "Daniel," he said loudly, "you're not real." The whisper stopped. Silence returned. But then something answered, not with words. A loud knock at the front door. He opened it slowly. No one there. But on the ground lay a single photograph, wet from rain. He picked it up with trembling hands. It was a picture of him when he was 13, standing by a lake on a holiday trip. His heart twisted. That wasn't any lake. That was the lake. The one from his dreams. The one from his past. The one where everything had changed. He dropped the photo and ran back inside. But the moment he stepped into the hallway, he saw it. Footprints. Wet footprints. Leading into his house. Child-sized. Daniel's breath left his body. He didn't scream. He couldn't. Instead, he followed the footprints slowly towards the living room. They stopped in front of his old wooden mirror. He stared at his reflection, but he wasn't alone in it. The boy was standing beside him, whispering something he couldn't hear. Daniel collapsed to the floor. Tears stung his eyes. He didn't blink. He didn't dare. Every cell in his body screamed danger. But the boy looked calm, sad, hurt. Daniel realized something. The boy wasn't there to haunt him. The boy wanted something. Something Daniel had stolen. The truth. His phone rang suddenly, jolting him back to life. It was his sister, Anna. He hesitated before answering. "Daniel, I need to talk to you," she said nervously. "I was clearing Mom's attic today, and I found something. A newspaper clipping from 14 years ago." His heart thumped painfully. "About the boy who went missing," she continued. "Do you remember him?" Daniel didn't respond. "Daniel? Please," he whispered, "don't say his name." She hesitated. "You always acted strange when they found his bicycle by the lake. You never explained why you stopped swimming after that." "I have to go," he muttered abruptly. "Daniel," her voice softened, "what happened that day?" But he hung up. He stared at his shaking hands. He remembered everything. One summer afternoon, a dare, a stupid dare. "I bet you can't push him in the lake." He didn't mean for it to go so far. He didn't mean to panic and run instead of helping. He didn't mean to hide, but he did. He hid everything. The body was never found, but now it had found him. The guilt had found him. The tapping began again. Only this time, it came from inside the mirror. Daniel couldn't live like this anymore. Sleep had become impossible. Food tasted like dust. Every photograph he took showed that same boy, standing closer each time. Even when he pointed the camera at nothing, he knew what he had to do. The truth wasn't going to stay buried. He had to face it. He drove back to the lake, the same one from 14 years ago. The moonlight rippled across the water just like it had that night. The air smelled of damp grass and something older, something familiar. Fear. He stood at the edge of the lake and whispered, "I'm here now. I won't run this time." The wind seemed to sigh. He waded slowly into the water. The cold seeped into his bones, but he kept going until the lake reached his waist. His heart hammered against his chest. He could almost hear his younger self screaming. He could hear that boy gasping for breath. "I didn't mean to," Daniel sobbed. "I swear, I didn't mean to." Then the water rippled, and beside him, another ripple followed. A shape rose from beneath, a pale hand. His tears blended with the lake water as the boy emerged, ghostly and quiet, eyes filled not with anger, but disappointment. Daniel fell to his knees in the water. "I'll confess," he cried. "I'll tell them everything. Just don't hate me anymore." The boy looked at him for a long moment. Then he simply turned away and walked across the water, disappearing into the fog. Daniel waited for something else, a scream, a vision, a punishment. But instead, everything finally fell silent. No tapping, no whispering, only peace. The next morning, Daniel went to the police. He told them everything, every detail, every lie, every year of guilt. They listened, and for the first time, he felt free. As he was led into custody, Mrs. Avery stood at her door, tears in her eyes. His sister held his hand through the bars. "You did the right thing," she whispered. Daniel looked out at the world one last time and said, "The past doesn't hunt you to destroy you. It hunts you to be heard." And I finally listened. He never returned to Hawthorne Town, but the lake remained, still, silent, waiting for the next secret to surface.